Oh my gosh, what can a buck do? It can change lives, especially when that buck is spent on a book. We got the guy that had $1 change the lives of thousands today on Business Banter.
I want $1.
I want more than $1. And Caren, I'm so excited about today's show. I can hardly stand it. I've been so excited about bringing our guest on because I watched him literally change the lives of thousands and thousands of business owners and entrepreneurs, all because of a chance meeting with a barrel of books for a buck. I cannot wait to bring him on here and tell the story.
So, shall we bring him on?
Let's bring him on.
Let's bring him
Ladies and
on.
gentlemen, please help us welcome to the operation today our business banter partner for the day, Mr. Craig Valine. Craig, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Good morning. It's wonderful to see you both.
Well, we're thrilled you're here. And today we're talking about service in the marketplace, in the market, in business, everywhere. Service. What do you think?
I like it.
One of the things, if you haven't joined us before, this is the Business Banter Box. Here's the operation. We bring on a guest. That guest, it is not an interview show. The three of us are going to have a simple conversation around service and business. And when we came up with the idea of kind of the topic of service today, Caren and I, there was only one person that came to mind, Craig, and that was you.
That's
And
awesome.
I always remember the story of that buck a book. For those of you guys that don't know, Craig is a consultant, an author, a speaker, a trainer. He's traveled the world. He's helped literally thousands of entrepreneurs and business owners really create a fulfilling business. And if I remember right, if I remember the story, it all goes down where you had a conversation with yourself, picking up a book in a barrel for a buck. I would love for you to just kind of tell that story real quick.
Yeah. So I'm a boy from Boston, Irish boy from Boston, and I had been broke. Actually, I had been temping, and that wasn't working. I couldn't even keep a temp job because I think, as many will relate to the show, we entrepreneurs are psychologically unemployable. And so every time I was at a temp job, I was thinking about the business I was starting. So one Sunday, I had about a buck in my pocket and a Boston Tea Pass. And I'm strolling through Copley Square in Boston, and I see this store that I've never seen before, and it's called Buck a Book. And it's right near the end of the Boston Marathon. So it's like diagonal from where the finish line is, the Boston Marathon. So I go in, and immediately as I walk in the door, I see this barrel of books. And it happens to be Dan Kennedy's Ultimate Marketing Plan book, first edition, for $1. So I ended up pulling that book out and standing in the bookstore for about 2 hours until this little redheaded clerk from behind the counter comes up and says, "Hey, mister, are you going to buy the book or what?" So I went up to the counter. I said, all I have is $1, and it was $1.05 because Boston tax at that time was 5 cents or 5%, right? And she goes, "That's all right." And she slides over the penny jar, and there were 5 pennies in there that I could apply to the sale. But one thing in that book changed my life forever, and that's how $1 can change a life. And that is the concept of enter the conversation currently occurring in the prospect's mind. What's going on in their mind right now where you can slide in and solve that problem as quickly as possible in a powerful and unique way. And I happened to be teaching martial arts at the time at a friend's school outside the city, and there happened to be a bunch of muggings happening on Boston Common. Every time people would walk from, let's say, Copley Square up to Tremont Street, for those people who know Boston, people were getting mugged. And it was on the news every day. And I said, how can we tie what I know into making some money and helping other people at the same time? And so my friend and I created a self-defense class that we took to local businesses around downtown Boston within a mile of Boston Common and called it Common Sense Self-Defense. We taught self-defense during lunch or after hours. And through that process, we got a bunch of people to sign up for his karate classes outside the city. Many of them still exist. And so I went from having $1 in my pocket to doing pretty well after a while. And it was all based on $1 investing in myself for $1 book, which I did not have the total amount tax, into changing my world, because now this is what I do for a living and help people use those concepts and things that I found in a book. And then I went on to study massively afterwards.
But you also figured out that you needed to implement because you immediately implemented. You had this book that you got for the dollar and you figured out what you needed to do to actually make that work for you, which is so cool.
Yeah, God shows up in weird ways. Whether you believe in God or not, there's something greater than ourselves that sometimes shows up right when you need it. And I was dead broke. I was afraid to even spend the dollar that I had in my pocket, but something told me to invest in that book and do something with it. And that thing jumped off the page.
Wow.
And somehow, some way, I went to my friend. I said, "Hey, let's create a self-defense class." We didn't have an agenda. We didn't have anything. We just taught basic stuff that came off the top of our head. Hey, you got to know this. Hey, if they come up behind you like this, And so it was imperfect action, which is a big lesson. It's like, even if you don't have all the answers yet, just start the process, because things will, kind of work themselves out.
It's really interesting. I mean, I think this is so interesting because I think one of the things that happens in both business and in life is sometimes we have to figure out what the problem is that we actually solve as business owners. And
Right.
I've worked with a bunch of business owners, and most of them get really frustrated sometimes with me because we always start with the end in mind. And I always ask the same problem, which is, what is the solution that you provide?
Right.
And most of them have really not thought this through. But if you really kind of backtrack, it's like, I like to start at the end and work backwards, right? As a crazy entrepreneur, that's, I think, where a lot of us start. And it's like, okay.
Stephen Covey, that's his whole thing, begin with the end in mind.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like, okay, well, what's the solution that you provide? And once you understand that, then you can answer the question, what is the problem that you solve?
Right.
And then you back it up again and go, well, who has that problem, like in the totality of the marketplace?
Right.
And then, taking it a step closer is like, who's the most profitable out of that subset? Right. And that's who we then talk to. Doesn't mean we can't talk to, and make sales or whatever project, but it really comes down to this idea of service. And service in the marketplace, I think, also ties into service of a or the community, right?
Yeah. Funny, when I moved here from Boston back in '96, that was my second stint here. I wanted to join Toastmasters. I thought I always wanted to be a world renowned speaker. And so I found a local Toastmasters group down the street from me, and they were sponsored by or hosted by the Pasadena JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And what they're known as leadership training through community service. So you learn skills as you do service for the community. And so they have fundraising, they have community service, they have personal development, they have all those things, but you become a greater person in the process of helping other people. And so I got very involved with service I've always been in service in some way, shape, or form, but that's how I actually got into service back in '96 here in Pasadena, was finding an organization that was known for it.
Do you feel that you are better equipped to work with business owners, entrepreneurs, small business owners because you have been there and you have picked yourself up, not just by the bootstraps, but by a dollar bill? Does that make you better equipped? I would think it would. You've experienced it.
There are so many reasons why I'm qualified. And based on what you just said, I have, number one, I was an EMT and a paramedic for the city of Boston. So I deal with stress in a very different way than most people. I still get frustrated, by the way, but I'm able to deal with stress on a different level.
We live in Los Angeles. I would think there was something a bit off if we didn't.
Just get on the road for 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But, I also have started with nothing. I've lost all my credit. I've lost all my contacts at one time. My reputation has been challenged before. We may cover it today, but I'm a recovering alcoholic. So I've almost nearly lost my life, health, family, everything. I've nearly lost everything, and I have come back.
Right.
And so for the business owner had nothing and has had these small basic problems, absolutely, fundamentally. If they have advanced problems, I can change it. I can fix it immediately. For the person going through tough challenges in life while they're running a business, I have that history as well. So there's all different facets. And it's not to say, hey, look at me, but I'm the best there is. I've just been there. There's so many different aspects of my life where I can be of service and help to another entrepreneur
Right.
that I don't think a lot of people can mention. Number one, they might keep it private to themselves, but number two, it's so advantageous to meet people where they are in their road to success.
So, Craig, this is kind of a funny story, and I know that we talked about being kind of open books on this show, and I am an open book. I have gone to Al-Anon for some time now as well, and so for those of you that are may have somebody in your life whose drinking or drug addiction is bothering you, or has bothered you, or maybe it is you. Please find yourself to a 12-step program, whatever that means for you. Al-Anon is for friends and family of alcoholics and addicts. Obviously, most people have heard of AA, but there's literally like 3 trillion different A's in the group. So whatever challenge you are having, there's probably a group for it. And Craig, I've been thinking about this the last few days leading up to this. And I'm going to ask you this just as another guy that goes to meetings. Both of us have a fairly prolific business portfolio of clients and projects and things. And, and I'm assuming that you go to meetings. I certainly go to meetings, and it's always interesting because in those meetings, a lot of people have service commitments, and it's things like, moving chairs or handing out literature or welcoming people to the meeting or, uh, birthday chips and hugs. And I always, every time I do service at a meeting like that, even the littlest thing, it always brings me back down to the core of what we do as businesses, which is be of service to our clients. And it is, when I first went to Al-Anon, it was quite humbling because I'm like, I'm a speaker and I speak on big stages and I've got these big multi-million-dollar projects and I run lots and lots of stuff. And these people want me to move a chair? Like, are they crazy? And they want me to put a couple of bucks in a basket for the privilege of moving a chair? But from the perspective of making that meeting run, moving a chair or shaking a hand or welcoming somebody, not only do I think it's quite humbling, but it also, for me anyways, it makes me a better business consultant or a business guy.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I come from the Dan Kennedy world where he is the type of consultant or expert who puts up a lot of boundaries for access and for how to communicate and all that thing. So I had that rigid kind of philosophy for a while, but yet my foundation is to be of service. So that was incongruent for me. What I think you can adapt from number one from Dan Kennedy's philosophy is like, hey, just have some boundaries. Don't let people walk all over you, and don't you guide the process, right? But from a services perspective, when for me especially for the person who is recovering from the addiction or the alcoholism or whatever it is that you're recovering from, I had to do whatever it took to stay sober. So when they said come early and set up the chairs, I was like a half an hour early before they told me to get there. Right? Because what else am I doing if I'm on my own? I'm thinking about alcohol, probably. Or what do I do with myself? And then, so when I'm done with the chairs, it's like, now what? What do I do for the next half an hour or hour before the meeting starts? Well, I can go help make the coffee. So I go make the coffee. Then it's like, okay, the coffee's done. Nobody's here yet. Why don't I go out to the front step and greet people when they come in? So, I think the philosophy you have about helping others who may need help, and that includes being an entrepreneur, right? It's like, hey, I want to help people who need help. Now, not, if you go to the business side, not everybody is my customer, but I'm always willing to help someone who needs help. Someone who says, hey, I don't have any money to pay you. And it's like, okay, then you're not an ideal client, but how can I help you? What resource can I pass your way? What small bit of advice can I say that may get you to a point where you could pay me, right? But in the grand scheme of things, I want somebody to succeed because I've been there when I had no money to pay for a guru or a course or a book even, right? It's like, I've been there. So it's like, I don't want to just shun them away. Hey, look, you're not my client. I can't help you. My first part comes from being of service. It's like, how can I help you?
So, and there's many ways to show up in service, right? And I think the first way for me has always is listening. I
Right.
think so many of us, in fact, just sitting on an interview like this, as I'm listening, and there's thoughts going through my head, and I'm trying to listen, but I want to, that kind of thing. And I think it's hard for small business owners and entrepreneurs. They get into, one-on-one networking, BNI, and they do that, and we're taught through that is listen first, right?
Right.
Listen first. And it's really hard but that's how you can show up in service. You don't know how you can serve someone unless they tell you how you can serve them. And I always ask this question: how can I support you?
Right.
That's the very first question I ask whenever I meet somebody.
I think one of the things that becomes a challenge, Caren, to your point with that is, and I'm just going to use myself as an example. One of the things I recognized early on in watching how other people showed up and how they were most likely kind of a hot mess
Right.
was I recognized that how you show up is how you show up.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that Al-Anon, and I know we're not going to make this an entire show about 12-step program, but one of the things that is so important about how Al-Anon we kind of view going forward is to not keep bringing up the past and to be fully present. So I don't know about anybody else, but I have lived a life of chaos to some extent. And when you live a life of chaos, you're always looking at the past to determine what's going to happen in the future.
Mhm.
And so what ultimately ends up happening is you can never be fully present. And when
Mm.
I started to really understand how I was showing up or how I showed up at networking events or business meetings or podcast interviews or client consults, Caren, to your point, listening can really only happen in the space and time in which somebody is showing up fully present.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not fully present, you can't really allow the space of the other person to fully seep in. I mean, you're just always like trying to say, "Oh, well, yes, and I've heard this saying, oh, well, you answer everything with yes and." Well, if you're answering everything with yes and, then you're really actually not being truly at its core, like authentic in listening to what they're saying because you're already prepping what you're going to say next.
Yeah.
I think being a good listener also requires you being a good question asker.
Yeah.
If you're truly
Right.
if you truly want to get to know someone, there's specific ways to ask the question and then keep them on track so they don't go sideways, because the yes and, right? But that's a skill, and that it takes time to be present. There's so much going on in our minds. Of course, we're there to benefit ourselves, but in benefiting ourselves, we have to help other people. We have to be there for other people.
And again, it also shows up in business in other ways. Casey, think back when we were doing all those events. You would always, and as the producer of the event, I was hands on. I mean, I was really hands on. I was
Yeah.
moving chairs, I was moving tables. Even when I was a cantor at a synagogue, I used to get a lot of, shit, because they would say, "Why are you moving tables and chairs?" And I would say, "Because they need to be moved." That would always be my answer. And two, I'm no better or worse than anybody else here. If I can pitch in and be of service, it's going to help my relationship with the people later on. You find that out?
It
I mean,
is. It is. When I look back at my career, and I know Craig, I think this falls, knowing your career, and Caren, I know it falls in line with your career as well. The three of us, you know, I have some of the best relationships in the world. Like, even if I'm selfish about it, with some of the best event producers and event bookers and people that are in a position of influence that could alter my business by way of putting me on stage or not putting me on stage or whatever, simply because I'm speaking at an event and I'm in the parking lot helping somebody with registration drag that crate that they always carry in of all that junk that they're going to set up while everybody else is in there chin wagging with each other around the chocolate fountain, puffing their chest and thinking they're cool. I'm in the parking lot, waiting for the gal to finish the cigarette so we can go in and set up the registration table. But in that moment out in the parking lot, that's where the true magic of building relationships and rapport and getting to know someone occurs. In my experience, better than at an event, puffed out chest, like
Right.
playing the part.
You either have a philosophy of being of service or not, but if I'm not able to help at that time, then I make sure that someone else can take that lead. When I was president of the California Junior Chamber of Commerce, and we had Robert Forster, the actor from Jackie Brown, come out and speak, and he's passed away since then. But what a brilliant speaker! He had so many stories to tell. But I remember I wanted to be there specifically to greet him and to say hello to him, and I couldn't because we were just behind schedule because he was a little bit late and everything. But I made sure that he was handed off to someone that I trusted that would pass on the things that I wanted to know about him, to know about us, things like that. So it's like, make sure that you're not handing someone off to somebody who's irresponsible. But like I said, if you have a mindset of being of service, a philosophy of being of service, then you're of service. It doesn't matter what it looks like. There's the old Wizard of Oz thing, right? It's like, never mind the guru behind the curtain. It's like, hey, I'm doing what needs to be done for a certain reason. And
well, let me flip this. I'm gonna go down a little bit of a rabbit hole because I think this is a really important distinction. We can sit here and talk about being of service all day long, and we can make the case to anybody watching or listening that they should be of service. It's a better mindset. However, there is a dark side to some extent, I think, of being of too much service when it comes at the cost of being taken advantage of, being at the receiving end of not having any type of boundary, being able to be just kind of walked over. Craig, unfortunately, you missed my sort of mini meltdown this morning that I had with Caren because I'm in a situation right now where, because I didn't have boundaries, because I was giving myself fully and wholly 100% of service, is coming back to, bite me in the ass a bit. And so I would love to hear both of your kind of thoughts on, is there a time where you could step over your own line of being too much of service and ultimately hinder your relationships, hinder your client, hinder potential I'm just looking at going, man, I could have boom, 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 boom to probably position myself a little bit better. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Caren, why don't you go?
Oh, thanks a lot. I was actually,
This was not in the show notes, by the way, kids. That's why anytime you see Caren and I or Craig lift up our Business Banter mug, that's the pause. Cheers, gang. That's the pause of like the producer going, okay, I'm going to collect my thoughts. One moment, please.
Okay, so and I think what we're talking about is giving too much, and how about the comment that gets me all the time? I want to pick your brain, and right, and okay, I get caught with okay, I want to help people. I want to be able to help them. I'll let them pick my brain, but how much am I going to let them pick my brain? Because if I let them pick my brain enough, they don't even need to hire me because I've just given them the whole enchilada. But if I don't let them pick my brain, I feel like I haven't been of service and I haven't helped them. So it's boundaries, like you both said. It's all about boundaries.
Yeah, I learned the hard way about that, getting picked my brain. So I have two comments on that. One is I don't do that anymore. I will fact find and say, tell me a little bit about your situation. What are you trying to accomplish? And then I learned very, very carefully from Roland Frazier.
I was just going to bring up Roland Frazier.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I'm sure I can help you. Here's how I work. Here's what happens. You can get a half day or full day of consultation, and we go through this process. We'll draw out all this, So I tell them exactly what to expect. But, again, I'm going to help someone who needs help either way. So if I qualify them up front and I know they can be a client, that's what I will tell them. This is where I'll go. But if it's not, if it's someone that I know is like, entrepreneur, someone who's not fully a business yet, but then I'll just give them some information, because I know that it's very few and far between that they will truly implement it. But if they are that person who wants to implement it, I'll see them again, and then we can talk about working together. But
Yeah,
if I may,
oh, sorry, Craig, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. About one situation about giving too much. There's one person that we all know, actually, a celebrity publicist who became a very close friend of mine. And the beginning of our relationship, I was not a groupie or anything. I just admired him. It was someone, I read his books. I loved his talk. He gives that signature talk, and I loved it. And that's how we connected. But I started doing work for him, and then that started being abused a little bit. It's like, hey, I need you to do this. Hey, I need you to do that. And like, wait, hold on. I run my own firm. I've been in business as long as you have, doing what I know how to do. And so we have developed a respect, but it took a stop. It's like, hey, stop. This is not, I'm not your intern. I'm not your groupie.
I got resentful. I would actually get resentful
Yeah.
that here I was again in a situation. Then I'll say never again. But you allow people to do it, it's really hard to not let them do it.
Yeah. It's important that you say, hey, look, we need to talk.
Yeah.
I just had a friend who's a local celebrity here, has a radio show and everything, and I'm doing social media, and he doesn't understand how much work it took for me to do what I did for him. He goes, oh, can you change this little thing? It's like, then I have to do the whole thing over again. It's like, it's good is good enough sometimes for what don't nitpick that you need a pause for 9 seconds there. So it's like, it's just like, look, at this time, based on other things going on in my life, which we may or may not talk about today, but it's like, I don't have the time to do this for you for free. Do you have somebody else that can help you do this for you? So.
Yeah, I think it's the, I learned this from Roland Frazier. We all know Roland, and he really, for me, was the catalyst to really change the "can I pick your brain?" And by the way, we are all fairly successful in what we do, or successful, I would say, in what we do. And I don't think any of us are perfect at this. So if you're watching or listening, recognize that even if you start this, it's awkward and weird, and if you're not used to sort of setting the path on how people do business with you, it can get the road is a little bit messy, right? So, now when somebody says, "Can I pick your brain?" I'm like, well, the way that works is I do a half-day consult, and here's how much the investment is, and I'm going to tell you that my goal is at the end of that consult that we refer to it as our secret evil little plan, and it's sort of like, hey, here's the deal. By the end of this consult, you're going to have so much value that my hope and desire is that you see so much value that we continue this relationship far beyond just this half-day consult. And what I find is that there's usually only a couple of ways people respond to that. Either go take a leap, or who do you think you are, or, well, you're clearly not who you say you are, type thing. And it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
In sometimes people's response to that, sort of like, well, what do you think should happen?
Right.
It's when I used to belong very heavily to the local Chamber of Commerce, the Pasadena Chamber. It's a great chamber. It's a very large chamber. They do things well, but I kept on being introduced to the guys, the marketing guy for the area, who'll do anything for you. And I said, stop doing that.
Yeah.
I said, feel free to introduce me. Hey, this is Craig. He's a marketing strategist. Talk to him, or something to that effect.
Right.
But don't tell them what I'm going to do for them, because I don't know if I want to, or if I can help them the way they need to be helped. And so I stopped going to there, even though I'm friends with a lot of people in there, and I'm happy to help them again, as we discussed, if they need some help and they're not my ideal client. But don't introduce me as something I'm not. So what I make clear is, if they think I did business a certain way, and it's like, I may have done that in the past, but I have evolved to this business model, and this is what serves me and my family right now.
It literally happened to me this past week. I was in New York, and I was at a conference, and one of my friends that I hadn't connected with in years, she was there, and she was running around introducing me to, I was an attendee, but I'm also I'm on a new project right now that has me being the face of this project. And she kept introducing me in this event of my peers as, oh, here's Casey. He'll MC your event. Like he MCs things. He's a great MC. And I finally had to pull her aside and take her off to the side and say, listen, while I so much appreciate the fact that you are willing to sing my praises, this is not an event that I have any interest in emceeing. I don't like, I'm not an MC by trade. I MC for a couple of events for very specific reasons.
Right.
And it was really interesting because I think she was just kind of taken back a little bit, like, but you're awesome at that. I'm like, yeah, but I think it's to that point,
Right.
Craig. It's like, good for you for being able to say, hey, listen, love it, but I don't want to be introduced that way. I mean, Caren, you know this about me. You know, I used to do network marketing coaching
Right.
all the time. And I finally had to start telling people, I'm like, listen, our mastermind isn't a network. I love the profession. I love everything about it. But that's the evolution of where we are, is just, that's not the path that we're on at the moment.
And to piggyback on that, I work by referral, and I know that we all work by referral. But if I'm going to make a referral to somebody, I first check with the person that I'm going to make the referral with. This is who I'd like to refer to. This is their background. I think it's a good fit. I'm not sure. Would you like the introduction? Because again, the same reason, it's like you're not the be all, the end all to take care of everything. And when I am working with somebody or doing an initial call, I actually say, I may not be your cup of tea.
Right.
I
Yeah.
may not be your cup of tea. And that's why we'll have a brief conversation and I will not be offended. And you may not be my cup of tea. And I know you won't be offended either, because it becomes obvious and it becomes a mutual respect for one another when you both show up that way.
I'll tell you this. I learned this the hard way. My solution for this is I very, very, very rarely will I make one introduction. So if somebody says to me, who's the best real estate agent, or who's the best insurance gal, or who's the best fractional CEO, I'm like, great, here's 3 people.
Right.
Go interview all 3 and you tell me which one you want. The other thing about that is those 3 people think I'm passing a referral just to them, so it actually works.
Right.
I want to whiplash us again. Sorry, I'm in whiplash mode because I know you guys can handle it. Knowing all 3 of us, we all 3 have family in various capacities that we are essentially running the show for. And I'm just curious how we want to start to navigate, as it doesn't matter that we're getting older, but how do you navigate, or how do we navigate and square up being of service, kind of on call 24 hours a day for our clients and our friends and our family or whatever, and being able to show up of service to our close family that quite frankly, in all our cases sort of need it.
Well, first off, you shouldn't be available 24/7 and
Right.
on the weekends. And in all seriousness, I think that is the first step that somebody can take to take care of self-care, to take care of themselves. It to say, I'm not working on the weekends. And you know how cathartic that is when somebody says, well, I'm only available on the weekend. Well, I'm sorry. Unless it's somebody I really, really, now, if I don't want to meet with you, I don't really, really like you.
It's funny because I tried to call Caren at 4:30 and she just wouldn't take my call, and I couldn't figure out why. I'm just now figuring this out.
We keep going back to the boundary thing, because we need to be able to show up with some semblance of self-care for ourselves, because we have to show that we take care of ourselves. We have to actually make ourselves I'm losing the word, but that duplicatable, it's not the right word, but that I take a pause on the weekend. Maybe you should too.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife is going through pancreatic cancer treatment right now. She's at the tail end of her treatment, but she's getting the cumulative effects of 2 years of chemo and radiation. And so she's a mess right now. And so instead of it getting easier in the last part of her treatments, it's been very difficult, especially in the last month. So I have been very open with my clients about, I may have to reschedule appointments. I may have to blow you off in a polite way. because she comes first, but the work will get done, I assure you, so if I have to reschedule an appointment during the day, or I had work due at a certain specific time, I make that time up somehow, some way. And despite my rules of not working, let's say past 8 p.m. or not taking calls on weekends, if I had to move because they were considerate enough to change the schedule for my benefit, for
Yeah.
my family benefit, then I do that. But overall, you're right. It's like you got to have rules that you run your business by. And it's okay if it offends other people because, hey, look, when I call, I want you to answer the phone. No.
Right.
If I've already told you that I take calls between this time and this time, and or that I have my family comes first and I have at times have to reschedule appointments, this is the way I've got to run my business.
Family first. That family first. As we all know, I have a similar situation, and my friends and family know this. Obviously, my husband just got through a second bout of lymphoma,
Yeah.
and I'm his caregiver, and so I'm his caregiver while I'm also producing shows, and I'm his caregiver while I'm also doing whatever else I'm doing, and we find ourselves making our days. We still work those 40 to 60 hours, but
Right.
they may happen at 4 a.m. in the morning so that you can be there for your loved ones because it's family first. At the end of the day, family first.
Yeah, I will say that is I'm very routine driven, so it's like to get stuff done in the morning. To get as much done in the morning so that I have the afternoons for appointments and stuff done.
Right.
It doesn't always work out the way that I planned. I have those rules that I run my own business by,
Right.
and you just have to adapt and adopt.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if it's not perfect,
Right.
but if you have guidelines to at least start with, you can try. But life happens. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a significant natural event happening at the time of this recording. It's like we don't know what could happen, right? We just have to adapt and adopt. Right?
And Casey, you're also, I mean, all three of
Yeah,
us.
I mean, my dad is just on the tail end of going through dozens literally of chemo treatments and a bone marrow transplant. And I don't talk about it, I don't bring it into the business conversation that often, but there is an element where things are going to have to be shifting and moving around, and it's sort of like I just remember playing the game Risk when I was a kid, if I remember right. And you're like moving, it's kind of like strategizing, and you're moving, trying to move 3 moves ahead and 4 moves ahead. And sometimes it's just a hot mess. And I think for me, the challenge personally is that when things go to kind of a hot mess category, it sometimes is difficult when you're in the thick of it
Right.
to figure out how to stand still for a moment and untangle the mess. Like sometimes I feel like my own business and life and social circle is sort of like a wad of Christmas tree lights that's just been shoved in a bag. And sometimes for me, it shows up as call a friend, call Caren, call my Al-Anon sponsor, get to an Al-Anon meeting or whatever it takes. But for some recognition that we're in sort of a mess, and it's like, okay, stop. It's almost like stop, drop, and roll that we're learned as kids, right? It's like, how do you get out of a really sticky situation? It's like, you got to stop for a second, drop and roll your way out of it. And I think sometimes as business people, especially with businesses with lots of customers and lots of things going on, having those mechanisms pre-set up to recognize in ourselves what do we need to do to like push the pause button and reset is incredibly powerful once it's recognized. And until then, you're just a hot mess yourself.
But isn't it true? Do you guys find that when you do show up with support and how can I support you, and you know what's going on in your clients' lives and you support them that way? I have found that not all of them, but some of my clients, when they found out what I was going through, they actually parroted the very same words. How can I support you?
Right.
And when I first, I mean, I'm getting actually goosebumps. When I first heard that from a client, I had never I had never actually been asked, how can I support you? And it made me feel warm and fuzzy, and it made me feel heard, seen.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, what a great return that I had no idea I was going to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a different reaction to that. Honestly, um, I built an entire career, and I think a lot of business people have built careers on being the go-to person, the advice giver, the influence giver, the problem solver. I don't know how to answer that question. How can I support you? Because I've built an entire career of giving so much that the idea, just the idea, like Caren, you're getting goosebumps. I'm getting an anxiety attack.
I just like hearing it. It's not that I need, there's the same thing. I have no idea. There's nothing anyone at this point can do to support me. But hearing the words literally says, it- uh, you're there for me. If I ever needed that, you're there for me.
Right.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, so Craig, I mean, when somebody says, how can I support you? Do you have a list or it's the same thing, right?
I
No,
send them my Cash App account or my Bitcoin wallet.
what's funny is that last week I was in a situation where my wife couldn't walk. She had fallen a week before, and she basically could walk 1 inch at a time, and it was chaos. It was just chaos. And one of my clients asked me, are you going to be able to make this event? And I said, I am not going to be able to make this event. And she said, is there anything that I can do for you? And I jokingly said, if you have a wheelchair or a walker, that might help. And I joked about it. I said, I'm half kidding, but she goes, I will get one. And I'm like, no, I wasn't really asking. I was just joking because it's hard, right? Next day, she was out parked outside my driveway, had a wheelchair for me. Yeah. And I didn't have it in time to take her to chemo, but I had it in time to pick her up from chemo. And, it just, wow. The what people will actually go through and that's an important lesson in business too. It's like, people stay with you over time because they like you. They feel they have a relationship with you. And this person I've gotten to know over the last year has really, really gotten close and asked me all the time, "How is your wife? How's your wife? How are you doing? How's your self care?" And really took an interest with no other, hidden agenda or anything. Just really cares. Goes out of her way to find a wheelchair for my wife. That's just. And I was only half kidding. I was like, I could use a wheelchair, but I'm not asking you to go find one. So now I have a wheelchair, and we may or may not need it again, but we have one. So
I'm going to put up some call to actions right now because, I mean, we could continue talking for hours at this point. Um, Go check out CraigValineMarketing.com. It's his website. I know you have a giveaway here. Want to tell us a little bit about this?
yeah, I know you two are big on referrals, but let me tell you, I had a client and a friend and a longtime mastermind member named Dr. Brian Berg who passed away a few years ago during COVID. And he was a brilliant orthodontist in Glendale, California, who got almost 90% of his business through referral partnerships, referral relationships. He was a master at it. And so I interviewed him, and we discovered that there were really 7 basic rules to follow, or 7 basic secrets, if you will, of what it takes to build a really profitable referral relationship. And it's about a half an hour long. It's a recording. It's an audio recording because we did it back in 2011, but it's 100% applicable today. And grab that and listen to it and take notes.
Awesome. And I'm just going to throw up your social because you're all over the place. LinkedIn at Craig Valine, Facebook at Rapid Growth CMO,
Yeah.
Instagram at Craig Valine,
Yeah.
and YouTube. No BS, Craig Valine. You know that I actually did not know what no. I thought it was
Knobs.
knobs. I called it knobs for years, had no idea. And of course, we would love to have you guys follow us on the businessbantershow.com. And we have something really cool we're going to show. I'm going to throw up right now. Actually, not throw it up. If you want more, and you go ahead, scan this code. You can join join the expand the business community. Take your phone out, scan it, and you will be in the community. Any last thoughts, Mr. Eberhart?
I this has been this has been honestly from my heart one of my favorite shows that we've done, because I think so often we get into the how-tos and the metrics of marketing and business, and sometimes we forget, even if it's for a moment, that there's a human element to business. And you know, every customer is on their own journey, and many times we don't know what's going on in their head.
Right.
We don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know what their day looks like, what their business looks like, what their home life or family life or kids life or whatever is going on. And Craig, you are somebody that has changed so many lives. Even back when you were doing your events in Pasadena there. And I just always remember that at the forefront, it was all about a buck. And so my hope for you guys that are watching or listening, that maybe today was your walking past a barrel with a buck, and maybe you're just a couple of pennies short, and we were the couple of pennies. And if that is useful to you, then I hope you take what you like out of this, and go run with it. I mean, the three of us are here for you guys and the journey that you're on. And just from my heart and my soul, I appreciate you guys all being on here. And Caren and Craig, it has been an incredible time spent, incredible value for me personally. And I'm sure other people will feel the same way. So my heart is filled today.
Awesome.
Craig, any last thoughts from you before we say goodbye?
I remember telling Caren that she was one of my favorite people in the world. One of the last times I saw her, but Casey, every time that picture comes up on Facebook, every annual, I tell you, you're one of my favorite people in the world too. So thank you very much for having me on the show.
Well, thank you. And as Casey likes to say all the time, we appreciate you. Go out, give somebody an awesome day, and we'll see you next time on Business Banter. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.